Welcome to Fatima Today. I'm Carolyn Walsh. In 1917, the Blessed Mother appeared to the three young children of Fatima, who spent their days playing in the rolling farmland, taking care of their sheep, innocent, just having a ball all day long, every day. And she appeared to these three innocent children, unbeknownst to them, and spread messages of faith, of piety, of reparation for sin. She taught them many things that she wanted of them, that Christ wanted of them. Today we're going to talk to you about the apparitions from May 13th through October 13th in 1917. There's so much to learn. We could never cover everything, but we're going to try to share as much of the information of those dates with you as possible. And joining me is one of our members of the Fatima Today staff, Pat Stewart, who is well-read on the apparitions of Fatima. Pat, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to have a great time, I know.
I think so.
Pat, we've had so many conversations about this now, and I think you'll agree that there's so much to share about the children, about the apparitions, about what Our Lady brought to them. Before we get into it for our viewers, can you set up for us what this village was like?
Yes, indeed. We're talking about the year 1917. The place was Fatima, Portugal, and the village was known as Aljustrel. And Aljustrel was a farming community populated by squat one-story homes that were tiled with red roofs and white stone walls that were whitewashed. There were winding roads paved with cobblestones that were barely wide enough for two ox teams to pass each other by. The men worked in the fields during the day. The women and the children did the chores at home. They would carry their heavy loads on their heads, 4 and 5 gallon jugs of water, and everyone went barefoot. It's a warm country, and there was people who lived simple and devout lives as Catholics. Their homes were not lavishly furnished. They had simple furnishings, but they cooked over fireplaces. They used candles for illumination. They grew their own vegetables, but they were content and happy with the simplicity of their lives.
And their lives really revolved around their faith and around their parish, which was the parish church was actually in the village of Fatima.
Correct.
In the village they lived in, Aljustrel, there were somewhere around 100 people. So we're really talking about a very, very small community.
Right.
Well, we know that day to day, Jacinta, Francisco, and Lucia, being the eldest, every day they went off with the sheep, and they would spend the entire day. And they would break for lunch, and then they would come home at supper time. And they just would play. They would have their children's games going on. I think one thing that's really interesting for us to remember before we talk about the apparitions is that this was a community where the children typically received their first communion around the age of 12. Lucia had received it when she was 6, which was very young, but the priest had determined that she was ready. Francisco and Jacinta had not yet received their first Holy Communion, even though they wanted to. And so as they had day after day in the fields, Lucia really taught them a lot about their faith, which is really such a beautiful thing to think about, a young girl teaching two younger people, her cousins, about what it meant to be Catholic and what the Blessed Sacrament actually meant.
True, particularly when you realize that they're all very young children. Lucia was only 9 years old in 1917, and Francisco was 8, and his sister Jacinta was only 7.
Right, right. So here we have, prior to this in 1916, we'll tell our viewers quickly that the angel of Portugal appeared to the children and brought with him the Blessed Sacrament, and actually Jacinta and Francisco were able to receive the precious blood, and Lucia was given the sacred host, the Blessed Sacrament in the form of the host. So they've had a little bit of time, a little bit of pre-preparation for the actual apparitions of the Blessed Mother. And then it's on May 13th in 1917 that it's just an ordinary day, and they're out with the sheep, and they're having their fun, when they see a flash of light, and they instantly assume that a storm is coming. So they say, let's hurry along and let's get moving forward. So as they're moving forward, they come upon the Blessed Mother. And then they don't know who she is. But she assures them, she says, do not be afraid, I will do you no harm. But they said that the light that she was surrounded by was brighter than the sun, brighter than any light they had ever seen. And she said to them, she assured them she would do them no harm. And Lucia asks her, where are you from? And she says, I am from heaven. And in such a childlike way, what's Lucia's first question? Will I go to heaven? Am I going to go to heaven? And she's assured that she will, and so will Jacinta and Francisco. And so begins this whole visit with the Blessed Mother. This is really an amazing thing. I want to just give you some background here, too. On the same day, at the same time, Pope Pius XII, at that very time, was being consecrated a bishop, which is beautiful because we know that he is the Pope who affirmed Fatima as a reaffirmation of the gospel, and he's also the Pope who led us through World War II. The Blessed Mother asked them, most in particular, to establish devotion to her Immaculate Heart. And we're going to talk about that through all the other apparitions. That's what she's asking the children to do. And she also asked them if they're willing to take on the suffering that God asks of them. And they say, yes, we are. And at that point, she opens her hands, and just the rays of light of God's grace that she's bringing through herself to them is so overpowering. And they know that they'll have much to suffer, but they have such comfort and joy knowing that she will be with them. They said that that light radiated through them. They knew it was from God, and they could see themselves, they said, more clearly than if they looked at themselves in a mirror, which is so incredible. So she leaves them with this knowledge that they will suffer much, and that they are now to establish this devotion to her Immaculate Heart, and that they are to say the Rosary to make up for the sins of mankind and for their own sins, and to bring peace in the world and to bring about an end to war. They're left with this tremendous responsibility, and yet joyfully they go forward with it. It's important for us to know, though, that it was not well received. You can share a little bit about that, Pat. I know we've talked about.
That's true. She also said to them that she wanted them to return on the 13th of the next month. And initially they were going to keep secret what they had seen in the field, which was called the Cova de Iria, which is the Cove of Irene in Portuguese. And we'll refer to it as the Cova, which is the place of the apparition. And as the month progressed, working up to June 13th, little Jacinta blurted out at one point to her parents that they had seen Our Lady from Heaven. So the secret was out. And the parents of the children were pretty skeptical. They weren't quite sure that they believed everything the children were telling them. But as the June 13th date approached, the next date for the second apparition, the parents were feeling pretty comfortable that the children would never go back to the Cova. And the reason was that June 13th was the feast of St. Anthony. And he is the most popular saint in Portugal. And it is a day of great festivals and celebration all throughout the countryside, and a day in which there's fireworks in the village, and music, and games to be played, and food to be shared. And these were poor people, and this was a wonderful opportunity that they all look forward to every year. So the parents of the children were very convinced they wouldn't bother going back to the Cova. Well, in fact, the children would not be deterred, and they fully intended to go back to the Cova to see Our Lady. The crowd had grown to about 50 people at the Cova because the word had spread in the course of the prior month that there had been something the children had seen. So there were several other people there at the time. And at the appointed hour, just before the appointed hour, people were waiting at Lucia's home to accompany her to the Cova for the apparition. She wasn't happy to see them. She felt kind of uncomfortable, and but she allowed them to accompany her to the apparition site. She was actually quite miserable. She wept on the way to Jacinta's house, and she had been suffering great derision from her parents and her mother particularly, and her brothers and sisters, who simply didn't believe what she was telling them about the apparition. And little Jacinta said, "You're suffered to make reparation and to convert sinners," as Our Lady had told us. And so the children offered all their suffering as reparation for sinners, and they kept their eyes always on the words of Our Lady as strength for their activities. When they got to the cova, Lucia, as she and Our Lady appeared as she over the little Eisenhower tree that she had been at the first apparition, Lucia asked, as she always did, "What do you want of me?" And Our Lady requested of Lucia, "I want you to come here on the 13th day of the coming month. I want you to recite 5 decades of the Rosary every day and learn to read, and I will tell you later what I want of you." Lucia asked whether all 3 children would go to heaven, and Our Lady said, "Yes, Jacinta and Francisco I will take soon, but you are to stay here because the Lord wishes to make use of you to make the world know who I am. He wishes to establish in the world the devotion to my Immaculate Heart." And in writing about this apparition, just as recently as 2000, then Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger, who was the prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, who's now our Holy Father, Pope Benedict, he wrote that the meaning of the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of Mary could be understood in these terms. In biblical language, the heart indicates the center of life, where reason, will, temperament, and sensibilities all unite in an individual. And in Scripture, Matthew describes and tells us that an Immaculate Heart is one with God's grace that has achieved perfect interior unity and therefore sees God. And this is indeed the heart of our Blessed Mother. Right. To be devoted to her Immaculate Heart is to embrace this attitude of heart for ourselves and to seek that oneness with God that she has achieved. The children kept secret the revelation of the Immaculate Heart devotion, even though Our Lady had not yet asked them to do so, but they just sensed that this was the right thing for them to do. After the apparition, they were asked by onlookers to tell them what they had heard, and they refused. The pressure from the community started to build on them and from their families. Families thought they were lying. Their mother disliked the attention of and the gossip of neighbors that was developing. And the children showed great endurance and fortitude in resisting the pressure that was coming from those closest to them to take back what they had revealed.
Right. Right. This is just so incredible when we realize that these children, you know, this is an opportunity for them to really seize the limelight and pull attention to themselves, and that is not what they were after. Their intentions and their devotion was so pure, and in spite of what they were suffering, you know, they could have turned this into their own glory. They could have just succumbed to the pressures of the parents and the community that were being very critical of them, and not move forward with it. But they did move forward with it, and a month later, on July 13th, they are back at the cova. And this is a very important apparition. The July 13th one is pivotal in many ways. The Blessed Mother reaffirms that she wants the children to be saying the Rosary. She implores them that this is so important to establish peace in the world and to bring about an end to war and to convert sinners. What she does in this vision, in this apparition, she shows them a vision of hell. They see hell. Now, in 1917, they're talking about this as being a time where people are forgetting or ignoring or even disputing that hell actually exists. Well, jettison that 90 years later to today, and we certainly know that that is even more true today, that many people dispute that hell actually exists. This is Our Lady. This is the Immaculate Heart. This is the woman who wants to bring us to her Son, to our Savior, She shows them hell. Hell is real. They see the visions of the people, of the demons. The demons are as if a piece of coal, so translucent with fire, had on images, were images and forms that were things that we couldn't even imagine, but so ghastly in their form. And you could identify that these were people, these were souls, and they were falling in like ashes from a fireplace. Well, what does that tell us? Many people will go to hell. The Blessed Mother said this, that many people will go to hell unless we get ourselves correctly ordered towards God. And she implored the children once again to spread this message, to let people know that hell actually did exist, and unless we mended our ways, unless we lived a life for God, that we too could end up there. It's at this apparition that that the children are taught that beautiful prayer that we say at the end of each decade, which is, "O my Jesus, forgive us our sins, save us from the fires of hell, lead all souls to heaven, especially those in most need of thy mercy." She just asked them, please sacrifice yourself for sinners. These sufferings that they would endure were sacrifices to make up for the sins of mankind so that we could have conversion. There's a vision here, too, that comes out later as part of the Fatima secrets, and you talk about it beautifully with the angel and the sword.
Well, this is also, this third part of the secret, there were 3 parts of the secret of Fatima, as you know. The first was a vision of hell. The second was the devotion to the Immaculate Heart of our Blessed Mother. And the third was the apparition in which the children saw an angel with a flaming sword in his hand to the left of our Blessed Mother, who radiated toward him with one hand and pointed to the earth with the other. It's a very elaborate image of the world. It shows a lot of destruction, a mountain, a ruined city, priests and religious and bishops martyred, and it's a very complex and somewhat frightening image, and it was not revealed until 2000. But in fact, Cardinal Ratzinger, in his commentary, points out that this is actually a very hopeful image, because the key to the image, the key words in the image are the words of the angel when he cries out, "Penance, penance, penance." And what that tells us in this symbolic revelation is that the future can be changed, and we have the ability to change the image of punishment and devastation in the world by turning to God, by praying, by offering sacrifices to save sinners and save ourselves in the world. And it stresses the importance of human freedom, so that this is actually an image of great hope, and which was finally revealed, as I say, just as recently as the year 2000.
Right. And following this vision, I mean, the anger and frustration of her parents, of their parents, of the community is mounting. They've seen this devastating vision, but Lucia's father's fields are being trampled. He's losing his livelihood. There are articles that are coming up that are being written just disparaging the children and disparaging the whole idea that the Blessed Mother is appearing.
It's true. And at this vision is where she said to them specifically, tell this to no one.
Right.
So now they have been mandated by the Blessed Mother to preserve her secrets.
Right.
And as you say, the pressure has mounted. The priests are skeptical. They think this is a fraud, and they're eager to protect the faith. The newspapers are skeptical. Her father's skeptical. And yet they endure, and they suffer all kinds of persecution rather than betray her and keeping the secret.
And then we come up to what is so appalling. We come up approaching the August 13th.
August 13th, the next day of the appointed day for the apparition. The town administrator for Algestrel belonged to a religious group that was called Naturalist. They opposed Christianity, and they were determined to put a stop to all this nonsense of the talk of apparitions. The people knew that the children had said they had seen something, but the children, what they kept secret was what the Blessed Mother had revealed to them, because her words could not be heard by those who were present in the cova. Right. Only the children could hear her. So he decided to take a firm stand, and he, under the pretext of taking the children to see the pastor in Algestrel before the appointed vision on August 13th, he took them, picked them up, and instead took them to his home, where he kept them captive for 2 days. He threatened them. He threatened them with jail. He threatened them with bodily harm. He threatened them with boiling them in oil. And now these are children of 10, 9, and 8 years old. Terrifying experience. They thought they'd never see their parents again. And yet they endured. They would not succumb. And in this, I think we see a tremendous lesson. We see that God chose these children, the weakest and most vulnerable members of the community, to be the messengers, ultimately. And he allowed them to go through these tremendous pressures, be threatened, to endure tremendous fear, and they would not yield. Right. And the lesson, I think, for us is, if these youngsters could obey in the face of what they were confronting, how can we not obey Our Lady's message?
Absolutely.
At the cova at that time, 6,000 people waited. Our Blessed Mother's light appeared over the tree, but when the children were not there, she's left. When the children were finally released 2 days later, she did appear to them on August 19th at another location, and she renewed her request for them to go to the cova on the 13th to continue to recite the rosary every day, and that on the last month, October, she would perform the miracle so that all would believe.
Right. Incredible. And now we come up to September 13th, the 5th apparition for the children. By now, word has spread, because of the kidnapping, as we call it, because they were put into prison like that, the word of these children and the apparitions of the Blessed Mother have now spread. So by the time they are approaching the cova for this September 13th, there are 25,000 people or more. They're waiting. And as Lucia reflects on this in her memoirs, as saying, it was like walking through the New Testament as Christ walks into Palestine, and people are in the trees, and they're on the walls, and they're yelling from every direction, imploring them, ask her to heal my deaf son, help her to convert me a sinner, over and over and over again. And she was just struck at the parallel between how they were walking through to meet with the Blessed Mother, and what Christ actually walked through so many times as he met the crowds. And it's here again that the Blessed Mother once again really tells them that they are doing a good job. They are growing spiritually. They are growing closer to Christ. They're growing in virtue by leaps and bounds in ways that we couldn't imagine. They're giving their lunches away. They're abstaining from water on hot days. They're wearing rough cords around their waist that actually cut their skin. They're bowing their heads with such profound reverence in ways that we can only hope to. And it's here that, once again, there's more confirmation. Father Frumagayo, I don't know about the pronunciation of that, is a priest who's there to dispel this whole apparition. He thinks that it's false, and he is instantly converted and knows that the Blessed Mother is appearing. We're running out of time. October 13th,
October
let's get
13th,
there.
the tremendous day of the miracle. 70,000 people are gathered at the cova. Our Lady appears. She says, I am the Lady of the Rosary. She implores them to continue to say the Rosary every day. And she performs the great miracle of the sun, in which the sun parts, the clouds part, the sun is there, it begins to dance and gyrate in the sky. For 10 minutes, it starts to fall as though falling towards the crowd in the earth, and then stops, and it retreats back into the heavens. This is the great miracle she promised to demonstrate to the crowd who she was and the validity of all that she had told the children. A correspondent for a major news service was present and cabled the news story of this apparition to the news services in the United States. It was never published because the World Series was going on at the same time, and it only got a few lines in the newspaper on page 24. But the miracle she fulfilled as she said she would. After this great miracle, the children continued to endure some persecution. Lucia's father resented the crowd, having trampled his his garden. He would never be able to grow food there again. But her mother did relent and allow her to go to school to learn to read, as the Blessed Mother had asked in an earlier apparition. The result was an increase in devotion to Our Lady of Fatima. And as Lucia said, the purpose of all the apparitions was to help people grow in faith, hope, and love. And by faith, we believe in God. By hope, we cling to God. And by love, we serve God.
That's so beautiful. I love one of the details of the October 13th apparition that is so powerful is that Saint Joseph was there holding the child Jesus and gave a great blessing. It's the only approved apparition where he actually appears. Pat, there's so much stuff to get into. I mean, we could go on and on, but it's really beautiful, and really the Blessed Mother implores us to say the Rosary. Remember to say your Rosary, wear your scapular. Thank you for joining us.
Our Lady at Fatima said, "Pray, pray a great deal, and make sacrifices for sinners, for many souls go to hell because they have no one to pray and make sacrifices for them." Our Lady at Fatima said, "My Immaculate Heart will be your refuge and the way that will lead you to God."